Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Mini Sky Tonight. So I had a young viewer ask me, why is it that stars twinkle and planets don't? And it's a very good question. We always have the old nursery rhyme of twinkle, twinkle, little star, and we know that stars flicker in the sky, but what causes it? Why is it that these balls of gas all of a sudden look like they're flickering? Now, this is to exclude unique types of stars that vary in brightness and everything. I'm talking about standard candles or standard stars. Why do they look like they're flickering in our sky? So let's dive into this question to find out, why is it that we have these flickering or twinkling stars? So let's start at the source, the star. Most standard stars shine with a steady light. And as the light goes through space, that light spreads out uniformly in a rough distance area. In fact, if I recall correctly, it's 1 over the distance squared. So as the further you get out, it spreads its area. And you can do this kind of experiment with a flashlight at home. Basically, take the area of the flashlight circle that the light comes out of and shine that light onto another wall. And you'll notice the area that the light covers is much bigger, but it's much fainter because it's still the same amount of light, but spread out uniformly over a distance. So keep in mind that when we see light from stars, that light has been spread out so thin, it looks relatively faint. So we're dealing with a very faint power source. Compared to the sun, which is relatively close to us, and we get a huge amount of light. The stars, in fact, the closest star to us is over 3 light years away, which is several millions of miles. Since it's so far away, the light has been spread out so thin that it's really hard to see. So then it comes to us. It hits our atmosphere. And light does tricky things when it comes into contact with different mediums. What I mean by different mediums is the light goes through different things. In space, it's close to a vacuum, so it doesn't have things to interact with. But the second it hits our atmosphere or any type of other substance, it does weird things. Like, for example, light bends in different types of stuff. Like in here, and we have a glass. As you notice, the light looks like it's bending. Even though it's going in a straight line, the light is bent inside glass. And you can see the same thing in water. In fact, a fun experiment to do, I call it the bent pencil experiment, or the broken pencil. It was always a fun science experiment I would often do with students, is where it's like, I can guarantee you I can make this pencil look like it's broken without actually breaking it. And then when you stick it into water, it literally looks like this pencil is busted, even though it's uniform. That's because the light, as it hits the pencil and reflects back to you, is bent as it goes through water. And our atmosphere is filled with water because we have an abundance of water. In fact, the concept of a mirage is created by water. As heat hits the ground, water vapor starts to rise. And as light goes through this water vapor, it looks like it's bending the light. So hence why the mirage looks like, oh, there's a distant lake that I can go to get a drink. Not really. That's the light playing tricks on you because it's being bent through the water vapor in the sky. So that's what's going on in our atmosphere. I sometimes think of like looking at the stars with their faint light coming to us, like looking at a light at the bottom of a choppy pool, or looking at those iridescent lights at the bottom of a hot tub. Our atmosphere is filled with all this water vapor, and our atmosphere is constantly moving due to the jet stream. So with all this faint light coming through our atmosphere, and it's being reflected and refracted constantly, and it's having to go through moving air, basically, or moving water vapor in some cases, it's really difficult for stars to look like they're shining with a steady light. So that's why stars twinkle. They basically are having to shine a faint beam of light through our constantly moving atmosphere. So the reason being why stars twinkle is because of our active atmosphere. And it becomes more disruptive as you have different weather patterns and everything. So on the top one, you just have a normal everyday, and sometimes it could be like a stagnant day, like stagnant air, you get a ton of refraction. Now during the winter time, when temperatures are colder and there's not as much water vapor in the sky, that's where you get good clearing signs, because you don't get a lot of twinkling stars in the wintertime sky, assuming it's a nice clear winter night and no wind or anything. And this is why many observatories are up on higher end peaks, because that's less atmosphere that they have to observe through, less water vapor for them to have to observe through to be able to see the stars twinkle less. So that's why many observatories are farther up on mountaintops rather than being down on the ground. But that still leaves a problem. We still have several thousand feet of atmosphere, even at the tallest peaks, that we still have to deal with. Fortunately, with the space age, we were able to send observatories up into space to kind of mitigate having to deal with our atmosphere. But yet we still have observatories here on the ground. So how do they compensate for having to deal with all this choppy air? As I mentioned, observatories up on higher mountains. So the way we were able to figure it out is a unique technique called adaptive optics, where we're able to take a steady source, shine it into the atmosphere, because we already know what that source is. One example is the Palomar Observatory. They shine a steady light up into the atmosphere. They know the frequency of that light and its power, and so they shine it up into the atmosphere to see what it does. And then they can take a look at how it interacts with the sky and use some computer technology to adapt for it, hence adaptive optics. So this is how it kind of works. You shine the steady light, and the light that the beam is supposed to represent comes in through the telescope, and then we have the wavefront sensor saying, okay, we know what it's supposed to be. This sensor is detecting something else, and through the feedback, we're able to say, okay, this is what it's supposed to be, and then we have the output. So using special types of equipment and technology, we're able to adapt telescopes to look at steady light, even through our atmosphere, and be able to adjust accordingly, depending upon what's going on. So with stars twinkling and with this new technology, we're able to see images much more clearly. As you can see, the images on the left, they represent what it would be like without the adaptive optics system. So as you can see, it's incredibly grainy, it's really fuzzy, and that's just because we have an amazing atmosphere that's active. But with the adaptive optics system on, you get to see images much more clearly, because the system is able to calculate what's going on in our atmosphere and remove it from the calculations. So why is it that planets don't twinkle? Is because, well, planets are closer. Kind of like our sun. We don't see our sun, quote unquote, twinkling because it's incredibly bright and it's much, 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 much closer. Whereas in the stars are so much farther away that the light is so faint, it's really hard for that faint light to get through our atmosphere. Whereas in the planets in our sun that are in our solar system, since they're much closer, have much more light coming towards us and don't twinkle as much as the distant stars. So that's why stars twinkle. If you have any questions, leave it down in the comments below. If you have any suggestions for other topics, leave it down in the comments as well. And until next time, stay safe, stay healthy, and as always, never stop learning.